Friedrich Schelling once wrote, "Philosophy starts with Hegel." A bold statement, wouldn't you say? Today, we dive into the intricate universe of Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, a man whose name is synonymous with mind-bending complexity and philosophical revolution. It's 1770, Stuttgart, Germany. A child is born into a world on the cusp of tumultuous change, the Age of Enlightenment. A period not unlike our own, marked by revolutions, not just of the political kind, but intellectual and scientific. Young Hegel was not born into privilege. His path to becoming one of the most influential thinkers in history was far from predestined. His father, an officer in the Duke of Wittenberg's administration, provided him with a modest upbringing. But his mother's influence was arguably more profound. She was the one who introduced him to the classics, inciting him an insatiable thirst for knowledge. At the young age of 13, tragedy struck when Hegel's mother passed away. The loss was unbearable, and some say it was this personal tragedy that spurred Hegel towards the mysteries of philosophy, to search for answers that the material world couldn't provide. In his formative years at the Tübinger Stift, Hegel forged relationships with future luminaries. It was an intellectual powerhouse. Could you imagine the conversations? Here, Hegel began shaping his ideas about the nature of freedom, spirit, and the march of history. But this was a man whose philosophy was not purely academic. Hegel was deeply influenced by the world around him. He lived through the French Revolution, a time of chaos, violence, but also the birth of new societal structures. The revolution was a real-world manifestation of his dialectical thinking. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. He saw the world not as a series of disconnected events, but as a constant process of becoming. Fast forward to 1807, Hegel's groundbreaking work, Phenomenology of Spirit, is published. This book, often considered one of the most difficult in Western philosophy, proposed a radical concept. That knowledge is not just of the world, but that the world itself is knowledge. Hegel argued that reality is a construct of the mind's incessant activity. As Hegel's reputation grew, so did his influence. He eventually became the rector of the University of Berlin, and his lectures were sought-after events, attended by students from all over Europe. Hegel was not just a philosopher locked in his tower. He was an active participant in society, a public intellectual whose thoughts shaped the epoch. In 1831, a cholera epidemic swept through Berlin, claiming Hegel among its victims. But while the man himself passed on, his ideas remained, reverberating through the halls of academia and far beyond. In the wake of his death, Hegel's philosophy became a fertile ground for new thoughts and blossoms. Figures like Karl Marx, Søren Kierkegaard, and Friedrich Nietzsche would all wrestle with Hegelian ideas, producing some of the most influential works of the 19th and 20th century. But the man and his philosophies were not without critics. Some viewed his ideas as dangerously radical, others as stodgily conservative. And yet, whether one loved or loathed Hegel, it was impossible to ignore him. His dialectic became a critical tool for understanding the world, his conceptions of history a blueprint for societal development. Even today, Hegel's philosophy remains potent. We see his dialectic at work in the clashes of contemporary ideologies, and his conception of freedom in our ongoing struggle for equality and justice. His view of history as an unfolding process reminds us that we are part of something larger, that we are active participants in the making of our world. So here we are, more than 2 centuries later, still grappling with the ideas of a man born into modest circumstances in a small German town. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, a name that continues to echo through the annals of philosophical thought, proving Schelling right. Philosophy truly does start with Hegel.